Now, I think we've got about 25 or so minutes, maybe half an hour. Not that I'm saying Jane overran, but clearly a super important subject to sort of cover off. And as I say, we heard this morning in the opening economic address that there is clearly a significance with the greenhouse gas emissions from the UK property stock. I think I'm right in saying it currently sits at over 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions that we emit as a country. So very significant, and clearly as part of the government and societal commitment to net zero emissions by 2050, as we heard this morning, there's a couple of key milestones coming down the track. One in 2025 for new tenancies being EPC rated C or above, and then for the entire private rented sector stock, both new and existing tenancies in 2028, again for EPC rated C and above. So plenty of things coming down the track. And again, as highlighted earlier, it is significant in the sense that I believe over or close to 70% of the private rented sector properties in England and Wales, which equates to about 3.2 million, are currently band D or below. So plenty to get into and discuss. We've got our experts here to take us through that. So I guess, to add to that scene setter, why is it so important that the housing market needs to change? Elise, I'll perhaps start with you.
As you've mentioned, the UK wants to get to net zero by 2050, and housing is a big contributor. There are over 25 million houses in the UK. The average house emits 6 tonnes of CO2 carbon emissions per year. So really, we've got a big opportunity to actually make housing more efficient, and therefore, have a big impact on reducing carbon emissions. And with the potential upcoming changes, I think the lender space is really for us to sort of push that opportunity. The government have a promise to build 300,000 new properties a year. By 2050, that equates to 8.4 million properties. Now, whether they meet that target is yet to be seen. But given that, as you've said, a big percentage of the housing, so 40% of housing is grade D, 14% is grade E. There is a big opportunity, and actually the improvements need to be made in the existing housing stock. It's not just by building new houses that we will meet that net zero target.
Thank you. And I think, it's easy perhaps to think, okay, 2025 is a long way off, 2028, even further away. I think our recent experience with the pandemic, and it's hard to believe that, we've been going through that pandemic for 2 years already. That, to me, that deadline is going to be round the corner very quickly. So I guess, Jane, how difficult is it going to be for some landlords and in turn brokers to sort of achieve these deadlines?
I think it's going to be very difficult. There was some recent analysis carried out, and it came back with 1.7 million homes in Britain won't be able to get to C or above. So we don't know how much of that sits in the private rental sector, but some of it is going to. So that, to start with, is a huge problem. These properties are probably going to be downvalued and deemed as unlettable. So you've got landlords out there with housing stock that in a couple of years' time, they won't be able to let out. So I think the first problem we've got from that is, are the landlords then just going to exit? And that reduces the housing in our private rental sector, which is another huge problem for us. Or is it going to be that, you've got all the new purchases coming in a new build and all that other stock being left perhaps to your first-time buyers that don't know about this, and then further down the line it's going to move there and there's going to be another sort of problem. So I think there's probably some unintended consequences that might come out of it if we're not careful. Another thing is geographical areas as well. So again, looking into some research recently, we've got places like Crawley, and they're saying that they think that only 5% of the houses there won't be able to get up to a C, which is great. But then you've got some places like Gwynedd in Wales came out as 25% of the housing stock there won't be able to get to a C. So again, this is another problem. Are we going to have landlords exiting certain pockets of the country everyone needs somewhere to live, and we know there's not enough stock, there's not enough housing stock, there's not enough private rented stock. So, you've got a problem where some parts of the country actually might not have enough housing. So I think we just need to be really careful as an industry and try and help the landlords get to where they need to be, because there's a lot of moving parts here. It could cause a huge problem.
Yeah, and I guess picking up on that unintended consequences, Elise, I don't know whether you've got a view as well. I mean, you've already named several there. We could have parts of the country, with significant levels of empty stock. I also wonder, this ultimately is a potential cost for landlords. They're business people, so is that going to lead to somebody else paying for it? And it lends me to think that rents will increase, because ultimately, somebody needs to sort of pick up the bill somewhere, and potentially a landlord won't want to sort of foot it themselves. I mean, on these unintended consequences, do you sort of see them sort of coming to fruition?
I think, I suppose one of the issues is that this bill was put forward to have the EPC rating of C for April 2025, 2028, and then in the residential mortgage sector in 2030. And then the aim is to have all properties at an EPC of C by 2035. You're right, potentially you could have property prisoners. We've seen mortgage prisoners. You could end up with property prisoners where they can't actually sell those properties because they don't have the rating. There will be exemptions available, but the issue always you tend to find is that it's those most vulnerable that get put in that position. Turning it on its head, there are opportunities out there. I think when you look we at Keystone, we have a green mortgage. We have an offering out there. We look at currently, and most people will look at EPC rating. For me, I think we need to see a shift towards the energy score. So that's something which sits alongside the rating, because actually you can have a 12-point range within a D banding and a C banding, and somebody may find that their property is a D rating, but it would only take 2 to 3 points to get it up to a C. For them, low energy lighting, maybe a £50, £100 cost gets it up to that EPC level. On the flip side, it could cost £10,000 if you're at that lower range. So I think, and as you say, that cost may be passed on to the tenant, but I think, again, turning it on its head, energy bills for the tenant will be lower. And you may find, the younger generation are very aware of sustainability. It may become that actually those properties become, there's high demand for them. So I think, there's different sides to it.
Yeah, and I guess, trying to remain balanced. Let's talk about, the positives. I mean, what are the upsides to landlords of improving their EPC rating beyond just meeting, the minimum requirements? And that green agenda, there must be some more benefits.
I think Elise has just touched on it now. I think energy bills is huge. This morning it was on the news about energy bills. We've talked about it in the last session, how much energy bills are going to go up, and all the changes that you can make will reduce the energy bills for tenants. So then you've got tenants are more likely to want to live in your property. They're more likely to stay there for a longer period. They're more likely to be happy when they're there. Potentially less rent. Not being able to pay their rent because they've got a bit more money because they're not spending it all on gas and electric. So I think there are positives to be had, and as a business person, hopefully the landlord will see those positives, but they will have to put some money in the front end before they get to that point. So.
Yeah. And what about sort of customer sort of behaviour or perception? In other, if I kind of can try and draw a parallel to other things we've been involved in. Obviously, we didn't have the diversity and inclusivity session today, but D&I, for example, is super important for employers, and therefore, in order to attract, the right talent, businesses need to prove that they are diverse and very inclusive. Is there a parallel in terms of customer behaviour and customer expectation that actually they do want to move into a house that has the right green credentials?
Absolutely, and I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is lots of things being brought in that is trying to improve the housing stock. So bringing, this is one. We've also seen a shift towards landlords being more the standards of landlords having to sort of be brought up, etc. I think the only thing we just need to be concerned about is this: every time we do this, we are seeing some landlords actually leaving the sector. So our private renters sector is reducing. So it's just a balancing act, I think.
Okay, and again, we touched on it first thing this morning. I think a question was asked about whether the delegate audience knew the EPC rating of their own homes. There were several who did. However, it became quite apparent that clearly education is vital in delivering the right message now, putting emphasis on the fact that perhaps action needs to take place now. So Elise, from your perspective, what are lenders, or what should lenders be doing to educate, broker partners?
So as a lender, we launched our green mortgage in April 2021. A couple of other specialist and buy-to-let lenders had entered the space and come up with green mortgages. Prior to that, it was mainly seen in the residential space, but actually in the last month, Nationwide have brought out a product which is A to C rated. So it's good to see that actually the big bank lenders are also seeing the importance of this, and it's not just the specialist market that's trying to make that change. I believe, like you say, education, learning, sharing that information is essential because, many people don't know what the EPC rating of their property is, and the only time they would want to know is if they may be selling it or, are looking to buy. As a lender, we, everybody can access the government website, so you can go on, put in your postcode, it will tell you your EPC rating of your property, whether it's valid or not, and what the potential EPC rating is and what improvements can be made. So you can look and it will tell you what those improvements potentially would cost, and what energy score that, how much that will increase your energy score and what potential rating it can get you up to. As a lender, we have gone down the route because the government website has an API, but it's not been updated for 18 months. So, it's not very useful. We've gone down the route of paying, we've got an API with a company called CoreLogic. It means that every time somebody puts an application into our system, it will tell you what the EPC rating of that property is, what the potential EPC rating could be, what the cost would be to improve to get to that EPC rating. So, we've got the green mortgage offering for properties that are existing housing stock rated A to C. Other lenders have similar products available. But we also look to say, what information can we share back with the brokers that they can then share with their clients. It's really important that they're thinking about this now, because a 5-year fixed product may, if a tenant changes during that time, it may be that an EPC is required and they've not got to that level. We also have a green mortgage product transfer. So if a landlord can't afford or can't get it up to that EPC rating to qualify for the green mortgage now, what they can do is make those improvements over that fixed rate period, and then they can switch on to a green mortgage. So we're trying to be a bit more innovative, but also as a lender, we kind of look at it that it's not just the product offering. As a company, we try to be greener. We're trying to be, we've got a paperless end-to-end processing system. We try to be greener as a company. We offset our carbon emissions, but it's not just that. It's trying to be part of the solution as well as offering solutions.
And are you able to give us a vision of, I think, focusing particularly on products, depending on who you speak to, and I've heard it sort of mentioned a few times, in conversation that, the product offering at the moment is a bit tokenistic. There are green mortgages out there. I'm sure Keystone have got plans to expand your offering, but I mean, beyond Keystone, but by all means plug yourselves. What's the sort of vision to sort of give people comfort that, there will be a full suite of products available in the foreseeable future?
We're working with our funder. We're a non-bank lender, so we have all of our loans are securitised, so we have to make sure that the investors are aware of that. Paragon had a green further advance product which was offered when the Green Home Grant was launched. Unfortunately, the government pulled it, so they then had to remove that product. But I think looking at what products can be available, whether it be a further advanced product to help fund those improvements, whether it's sort of a bridging, some sort of finance option where you can actually do that property up and then get onto it to a green product, to support the costs that will be there for a lot of landlords.
I think you're right. Most of the projects at the moment are for those properties that are already A to C. So what we need to see is something for the properties that are below that. How do we get them there? So things like bridging projects, renovation projects, more innovation. But I think what we really need is the government to, at the moment, it's just a proposal. So we just need a bit more from the government to you know, are these dates set in stone? Exactly what does it look like? And then I think the lenders, because I'm speaking to lots of lenders and there seems to be whispers that there will be products coming out and that they are going to be looking at the properties that are below the C rating, but it's difficult to move and actually get those products out there when we're still waiting for the actual guidance to be confirmed.
And I guess circling back to, you know, the educational piece, you know, from a broker perspective, you know, what do the audience need to be doing with their customers? You know, there will be, I'm sure, many landlords that are unaware that these deadlines are coming down the track. There may be some who are, I guess, confused with where do we start? What would you sort of recommend?
Shorebrook Bank did some research and they found that 15% of landlords had zero idea about the legislation at all. And I think probably what sits below that are landlords that are aware of it but honestly don't really know what to do about it. So I think the 15% isn't the total problem. For me, this is also a massive opportunity for brokers to sit down with your landlord customers and go through a whole holistic approach to it. So, you know, call them up even if they haven't got a mortgage that's due for renewal now and look at their portfolio, do the EPCs on each one of their properties and see where they come out, where they need to get to and what the cost of that looks like. And then also look at the whole portfolio again and, you know, what have we got coming up in the next few years that actually needs to be remortgaged, that's got some equity we can pull out. If they haven't got that ability there, you know, can we look at second charges? Who are you with now? Will the lenders let you sit behind that? Can we look at bridging products? So I guess it's about understanding the legislation yourself and being comfortable with the tools like the EPC tools that you can use. And then B, sitting down and doing a whole review. And that's a great opportunity because actually, A, you're helping your landlord, but B, actually it's a business opportunity because you're not then just waiting for your landlord's remortgage to come around, but actually you're sitting down and you're creating business for yourself, but helping them as well. So it's almost like a partnership then. You're helping the landlord to get to where they need to be. So I think it's a business opportunity for a broker. It will increase the trust that landlord has with you. Because they see that you're very knowledgeable and it's hopefully going to help the private rental sector. Perfect.
Okay, there's clearly, you're a key component in all of this. I'm hoping you've got a few questions as well, so I'd like to open it to the floor. If anybody's brave enough, you've been fantastic already this morning. Here we go, thank you, sir. Question down at the front.
Thank you. I may not be correct, but I don't think I've heard this morning an average cost of what this will be for the landlords. Do you have any idea of a figure? Because you'll keep saying that you're going to give the mortgages out with this extra availability. What is the average at the moment?
So it ranges, you know, I think it can cost about, you know, between 2,000 to, if a property's a higher energy score, to get it from a D up to a C. I think it's on average about 4,700. If you get to a lower range or an E property that you need to get up to a C, you could be looking 12 to 15,000. So, you know, there is a big range.
The Nationwide came up with 8,000 for the average and 25 at worst case scenario, but like Elise said, it really depends on where your property sits and what you need to do to it.
Can I just say, I'm a councillor in a town in Kent where we own our own social housing, and we've done the exercise for 2030, and the cost is coming out as an average of 100,000 per property.
Wow. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? That's food for thought.
I think I think for me that shows the need for the data, because, you know, there are so many, there's such a varied range. You know, you're saying up £100,000 of property. You know, I've looked at EPCs for, you know, I live in Kent, I've looked at the EPCs, the cost to improve my house from a D up to a C, and it's approximately 3,500. So, you know, it's really interesting to see that there's this big variance, and I think that's where it is confusing, because, you know, you hear a number like 100,000 and you go, I'm not going to even look down that avenue, you know, my best route is to exit. You hear a more, you know, it's still a big cost, but it's a more bearable cost, and it's something that you can look at how you can afford it. For me, that's where, you know, we really need that assistance from the government. They need to be clearer with their data. I looked at carbon emission data in 2018. We put some reporting together as a company. The total carbon emissions added up to 107% for the UK. You know, for me, that's where it lies, is clarity of data.
And I think on that note, that there probably will be some exclusions as well. And I've read that sort of up to about £10,000, anything that a landlord will be expected to put in, and anything above that, they might be able to apply for some sort of exclusion. So again, we're waiting for the government to confirm that, but you might not need to put 100,000 in. You might need to show that you've done X amount to get the property up to standard. So again, waiting for the government, but hopefully there will be something to stop you having to put 100,000 into each property if that's what it's coming out as.
Yeah, and they say every day is a school day, and I must confess that I didn't know a great deal about the energy score. You know, EPC is what it is for me. You know, you're either in one band or another band. Are you able to expand on that? I mean, where do people sort of go to sort of get an understanding of potentially how close I am to shifting into another band, and therefore potentially minimising my costs, or getting a realistic sort of view on, actually, this might only be a couple of grand rather than 10 or 100?
It's your energy performance certificate. So it has your rating on there, but it has the banding. And the government website has, you know, it will say, you know, low energy lighting. I think it's normally 2 to 3 points that will increase your energy score, the cost, and then the energy cost of save, you know, the cost it will save you on your energy bills, the cost for installation, and then it tells you, you know, on average a house produces 6 tonnes. The average EPC in the UK is a D. The average energy score in the UK is a 60. And, you know, we've done some analysis on the mortgages that we've completed on, and actually the average energy score is 65. So for me, you know, that does give that opportunity. It's 69 to get into a C band. So hopefully it will be slightly cheaper for some to get up to that rating. But, you know, I think for me, I'd hope that by the end of 2023, we'll see people referring more to energy scores rather than your EPC rating, to have more understanding.
Any further questions? See. You obviously want me to carry on talking, which I'm happy to do. Well, I mean, you know, from my perspective, I guess we're seeing this as a bit of a carrot and stick kind of exercise. You know, I'm assuming we'll start with a carrot and sort of incentivise, you know, understanding and change of behaviours, and actually getting these properties up to spec. I mean, you know, is the stick that deadline in 2025, or what else potentially may be introduced that, you know, at least encourages, forces, you know, greater speed of change?
So I think, you know, I think that actually people are more open to it than it might seem. Electric cars, you know, that's been much more successful than the government ever thought, and they currently come at a premium. So I think, you know, people are willing to be greener for the sake of being greener, not just for the cost benefit. But, you know, with regards to the minimum EPC of E that was implemented in 2018 and 2020, local councils are being given powers to go and investigate. And if a landlord has got a property and the EPC isn't an E, they can fine them. Now, I think for me, the balance is making sure that your fine is sufficient, that the landlord doesn't just go, I'll accept the fine because it's cheaper than doing the improvements.
Yeah. Yeah, but within that, you know, I'm assuming they will need to do improvements after the fine, or is it? Are you suggesting that it's sort of fine only, thank you very much?
It depends, you know, maybe that fine just gets bigger, but I think, you know, that's the hard thing. You know, if the council, if they do fine them and then they say, you know, you've got X number of months to make the improvements, you know, what's the next step? I think they need to have a bigger stick for when they have these rules in place. But, you know, as we've said, it's a bill that's gone into Parliament, which has got people talking, but it's not become law. So, is it that it will slip by a couple of years because they're busy dealing with other stuff at the minute? Or is it something that they will say, no, this is so important that actually it does go in 2025, and the buy-to-let is kind of the sector is, and unfortunately the training ground of seeing how you can then enforce this in the residential market.
I think we touched on it earlier as well, though, about you want those really good tenants in your property. So actually, is that your carrot as well? You want your property to be let out, you don't want any rental voids, and you want the good paying tenants. So actually, if you've got a property that's got quite a good energy performance, they're paying less on their bills, that is a positive, I think. Maybe not one that the landlord will see initially, but something that we can educate landlords and say, yes, you need the tick box exercise of getting here, but there are underlying benefits as well.
I can see time is running away from us, so I will offer it out one final time for any questions. I'm sure you must have plenty of landlord clients. Maybe you don't. There we go. Thank you, sir.
And we're talking about the cost of the work, and I'm thinking, well, what sort of work is it? Is it just a question of double glazing the windows and insulating the loft? Is that where we are?
It's different for every property, and Rightmove have got actually some really good data on their website to go and have a look at. So I think the thing that came out top was solar lighting, but obviously that is expensive to put in. But actually the thing that came out second was just changing energy efficient light bulbs, which obviously is on the much cheaper end of things. So it will be different for each property. Hot water cylinders, new boilers, draft exclusion. It talks on Rightmove about just even things like letterbox draft exclusion can help. So there are some things that are on the very cheap end, and there are things obviously on the much more expensive end. And each property will be different because it'll depend what you've got in there. But I think there's a range of things you can do, and you don't need to do everything.
Well, that to me sounds like a bit of an update, rather than anything really, really major.
It can be, but I guess it depends where your property starts. So if you've got a property that's down on the G rating, then you probably are going to need to do quite a bit of work to it. But actually, if you've got a property that's, perhaps in your D band, maybe as Elise touched on, like towards the top of that band, then it could be an update. It could be going around doing some draft exclusion, some energy light bulbs, and actually it could come out on the cheaper end. So it is very much going to be property specific. But Rightmove have got a lot of data on that, so it's definitely worth having a look at that range, and it gives you the cost as well and the likely amount that it would increase. So it's a good starting point to talk to your landlord customers.
Thank you, sir. In the interest of time, I will bring this session to a close, although I'd like to leave the last word to both of you. So I guess, as an area of focus, potential concern, it's enormous. It needs to be addressed. So I guess I'll start with you first, Elise. I'll ask you the same question. I mean, what would you recommend the delegate audience do as a sort of first action, having left here today?
Go on the government EPC register, check the EPC ratings, find the information, look at the energy score, look at what improvements can be made, and then pass that information on to your clients. Ask them if you can have a look at their portfolio and see what you can recommend that gives a holistic view to help improve the energy efficiency and remove hopefully any future hiccups when it comes to getting a mortgage if the EPC requirements are in place.
Jane, the final word from you.
I think just speak to your landlords, have a look at the whole portfolio, see where they need to be and help them to get there. And I think the one big thing is don't tie them to any 5-year fixed rates now until you've looked at the whole portfolio, because that is going to take them beyond the EPC date. So if you've got any remortgages coming up now, you need to consider it now. Otherwise, a couple of years down the line, they're going to be tied into a mortgage and not be able to release the equity they need to update their property.
Perfect. Excellent advice. Thank you very much. If we could show our appreciation for our panellists. Thank you very much.